wasn't part of this. So we are so excited at the Colorado Snowsports Museum. Our last program that we hosted in person for our Through the Lens series was March 4th of 2020. So then last year, and then obviously we had to stop. And then last year we did all of our programs on Zoom. Some of them were in different ways, and we had different people come in, and it was a little different. It wasn't great, but it was a good experience, and we learned. And then this year we were like, we were cramming 80 people in this place. Like they were in like sardines. So we were like, all right, we can't do that. So we're going to limit the number of tickets for the people here. We're going to do a small audience, but now we have people on Zoom. So there is a camera up there. Hi, people at Zoom. So I'm hoping that this works. I do have audio visual help over there. I couldn't manage this on my own. So hope this works. So good feedback, bad feedback, let us know. So we're going to try it. We'll see what it's like. It is kind of weird talking to no microphone then with no amplification. So it is kind of fun. And I do want to recognize, I have a couple board members. Dean Erickson is on Zoom, and JC Clark, our newest board member, is here in person. So this is JC Clark. And Andy Franklin did say he was going to join. And if I have other Zoom board members, sorry, I didn't know. I just looked at the Zoom list and I didn't see. I just saw Dean and JC. We have a wonderful board and an amazing museum. So we are so grateful. And then we're so grateful for all of our supporters, the museum members that are here tonight as well. So we can't do this without you. And I really want, before we get started, is thank Ron Mooney. This was his idea to do this. He wrote this very elaborate script. He's the one that contacted Matt. It's really Ron. So Ron is a walking encyclopedia of Olympics. I'm telling you, between Ron, where's JD? JD, Matt, we have a lot of experience. They've all been
Between us, there's probably 20 Olympics.
At least. So we have a lot. So for the people on Zoom, for some of you who may not be familiar, at the bottom of your panel, there's a thing called a chat. You can see a chat button. It says chats. So please, for the people on Zoom, start your own chat line. Start it. We've got Dana, who's our curator and our director of collections. She's online. She's going to answer your questions. We did an amazing program last year with a bunch of people, with over 500 descendants of 10th Mountain. And the chat between all of them was so fun to watch. So please, we encourage the people on Zoom to use the chat button and ask questions. And if you know the answer, throw it out there. Dana will type as fast as she can. And then at the end, when we do the Q&A, we are also going to include some online chats. So I'm not going to be rude, but I am going to pull my phone out because Dana's going to text me what those questions are. So yeah, so this is new. So it's a hybrid experience for us. So please bear with us. Hopefully all the audio and visual will work. Because if you all know, we've tried it before and it doesn't always work. So, okay, so enough of this. So now I'm going to introduce Ron, who I already did. Ron is a wonderful volunteer and big donor to the museum, him and his wife, Libby. So we're so grateful. I'm so happy I met Ron at the Vail Valley Foundation, and then I sucked him into here with me, just like I've sucked Holly in and all the others and everybody. So if you're my friend, if you're dating me, believe me, you are sucked in to volunteering. Thank you, Tim, for being here. So yeah, so we're all grateful. Yeah, don't hang around here too much. Even Kathy Roach volunteers. So Ron runs our tours. We have Vail history tours on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 a.m. And Ron does a fabulous job. So even if you've lived in Vail for like 58, 50, 60 years, I guarantee you will learn something on Ron's tour. So, because he talks a lot about the state history, the Ute Indians, like the whole thing and how it all relates back to Vail. And then JC is also a very good attendee of our tours because he is living history. He lived a lot of the fun parties and a lot of the fun stories. So we start the story and then JC actually is like, well, here's what really happened. And that's how it goes. So I am going to introduce or throw the microphone to Ron, and then I'm going to step back and be the wizard behind here, and hopefully it works.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jen, for all your hard work. So we all know the Olympics are February 4th to the 20th. Well, that's not counting the 15-hour time difference. So be very careful. All the schedules that you look at, in fact, the schedule that you have right there in front of you, that's Beijing time. So everything is 15 hours early. It's right. So opening ceremonies are going to be February 4th at 5 in the morning. But it's all live. So the great thing about these Olympics, everything is good. Every single hour of coverage is going to be on some NBC network. And if you don't have Peacock, which is the NBC pay-per-view on demand show, and it's not much. It is a minimal amount, especially you don't have to get it for more than 1 month if you don't want to. But that network, which is kind of, you can do it online, or you can, if you have Xfinity on your cable, you can go and use you just do it through your cable, and it actually comes with most Xfinity cable packages, so you don't even have to pay for it. But that's where you're going to find every single live event. Now the opening ceremonies are going to be on Peacock, but it's also the NBC network, KUSA Channel 9 is going to have the opening ceremonies live at 5 a.m. And so that first day, we've got the coverage starts at 4:30 on NBC. And then the opening ceremony goes on at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then after that, there's going to be a 3-hour special edition of the Today Show following the opening ceremonies. And then from 7 to 10. And then at 10 o'clock, from 10 to 12, there's going to be a 2-hour, the official Olympic preview that NBC always does. So that's 4:30 a.m. to noon on February 4th. That's all.
Is that February 4th here? So is that February 4th here?
That is 50. So yes, that is February 4th here because
But
it's 15. It's 15 hours. So the 5 o'clock here is basically 8 at night in Beijing when the ceremony starts.
It's so confusing.
It is confusing, but this Olympics is going to have more ways to watch than just about any, and it's going to be relatively easy. The USA Network, if you don't have the USA Network on your cable package, you probably do, because I think it is on the minimal tier. But if you don't, call your cable package and get the next tier up so you can get the USA Network, because the USA Network is going to be going 24 hours a day. And it's going to show not everything live, but it will go on, and it's kind of like on a loop. It'll be on like a 12-hour loop, and all night long it'll be going on as well. So you're going to be set for watching. Now, if you just can't wait to the opening ceremonies, the first live events of the game start on February 2nd, and that starts at 4 o'clock locally, and it's the U.S. versus Australia in mixed doubles curling. And that's on USA Network. And on February 3rd, NBC starts its primetime coverage. So a night before the opening ceremonies, the primetime coverage on NBC is going to start. And 9 News will go on before each of the 9 News at 4 goes on before the primetime telecast. 9 News at 10 goes on after the primetime telecast every night. And Matt will give us a rundown on all the special things that our local station is going to do in the pre and post telecast. There's going to be 2,800 hours of coverage, 7 sports, 15 disciplines, and if you count on your schedule there, you're going to count 15 disciplines there, and 109 medal events. And if you look at your schedule, you'll see the little medals are the events in that sport where they're going to have a medal ceremony, it's like the finals. Whereas all the shaded blue areas are just the events in that sport, but it's not a medal event. Maybe it's qualifying, whatever it might be. It's just there's not going to be a medal given on that time period.
Where did you find this?
That is on, so that is on the Beijing official, so there's two of the best websites. Olympics.com, which is basically the Beijing site, and that's where that's from. And NBCOlympics.com also. And then Matt will tell you about 9 News' website as well. And we were just saying, there's going to be a lot of different places to watch it. There's 7 new events. 4 of them are in mixed team sports. So the USOC or the IOC wanted to get more, more female athletes competing. And now 45% of all the athletes in these Olympics are going to be female. But they also wanted to get more mixed team events. So there's 4 new mixed team events in freestyle aerials, ski jump, snowboard cross, and short track relay. And then there's a new event in bobsled. There's a women's monobob, 1 person in the bobsled. First time it's ever happened. And then there's also men's and women's big air freestyle skiing. So now we are a museum. So if you thought you get out of here without any history tonight, you're definitely wrong.
Here's where all the wizardry comes in. Hopefully it'll work.
Here's the
Thank
Winter
you to
Olympics
Caitlin.
backstory.
The Daredevil drivers throw all caution overboard. Faster and faster down the Hohenberg Run.
Since their earliest days, the Winter Olympics have pushed big streams. But Priest has taken on a new meaning as X Games style events have taken primetime airwaves. So how did we get here? Let's start with the first Winter Olympics, held in Chamonix, France in 1924. Billed as the International Winter Sports Week, it had just 16 countries participating across 16 events. Taking a look at the lineup, ski jumping was the only real extreme sport there. Back then, the Winter Games were held in the same year as the Summer Games, a tradition that continued through 1992. In the years between, the number of events more than tripled, the number of countries participating quadrupled. And by the 1992 Games, the number of athletes vying for medals reached 1,800, a record at the time. Major geopolitical events also impacted the Olympics. World War II shut down the Games for 12 years. When they returned in 1948, Germany, which had hosted the Games before the war, and Japan weren't invited to compete. Cold War tensions ran high during the 1960s Games, with the US debating whether or not to allow athletes from communist countries to compete.
Teams from 30 countries are here. So the games begin.
And then again, the next time the US hosted, in 1980, leading to this memorable moment. Death-defying sports like luge and freestyle skiing found their way into the lineup. Then in 1998, the Games took a turn. Wait, that's not right. The Games took a twist. There it is, snowboarding. And yes, curling were officially added to the program in the Nagano Games. And the inclusion of the board sport served as a clue of what was to come. There have been 16 events added to the lineup over the last 2 Winter Olympic Games. Of those, 10 fall into the category of action sports. These sports, of course, aren't new to viewers of the X Games. That's just the point. The Winter X Games started in 1997, the year before snowboarding made its Olympic debut, and have served as a kind of unofficial testing ground for the Olympics. Halfpipe events, ski and snowboard cross, and slopestyle all appeared in the X Games before they made their Olympic debuts.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is a stick of the landing, if you will.
And this year, we're getting big air snowboarding, an event that's exactly what it sounds like it is. Big Tricks have brought a bigger stage. Snowboarding now claims a primetime spot in NBC's Olympic coverage, alongside figure skating, which, to be fair, is also getting more extreme, with skaters executing quad jumps. So if history continues, this could be the review of every Winter Olympics.
The 1948 Winter Olympics hit a new high in speed and excitement.
What he said.
So before we introduce Matt, I want to show you a couple more videos just to give you an idea of the venues in Beijing. You know, I don't think many of you have seen kind of the pre-game stuff and like what to expect there. And that it kind of doesn't start until the Olympics start. So it's nice to have a little background. So here's a few videos. This doesn't have any narration to it. It's just on the screen. So look at the ski jump. That's going to be really spectacular. It's kind of a standalone. The bird's nest, where they had the opening ceremonies, is going to be where the opening and closing ceremonies are going to be. There's only one new arena in all of Beijing, and that's the speed skating arena. So everything else is reused from the 2008 arena. The curling was for the swimming, and they just drained all the swimming pools below the curling ring. So in the winter, it's a curling ring. And there's the speed skating oval that Matt's going to talk about a bit. And that's the only new venue that's done. And then outside Beijing, you've got the skiing and snowboarding and the bob and luge tracks. And the cross country, of course. Look at the bob track. It's very unusual. Usually a bob track follows the curve of a mountain, and that, you know, hey, it's Beijing, so it's a standalone. Looks like a monorail track. Look at those rings on the thing. I know.
One thing I want to note is I think it's so cool that because Olympics are kind of becoming very environmentally friendly. Like they're building all these buildings and then they're not used. One new venue from Beijing. Like that's incredible that and I love that they're reusing, you know, all the water Olympics and they're calling it the ice cube. Like very clever, very interesting way to like host an Olympics again. So.
And even things like the ski jump and the bob and luge track. If China is smart about it, we're going to see in maybe not next Olympics, but the Olympics after that, all of a sudden China's going to have a bunch of bobsledders and lugers and ski jumpers. I mean, it's the same thing happened in, you know, when Salt Lake built the luge track. It became the only luge track other than the one back in Lake Placid, which is kind of old now. So now you see lugers and ski jumpers coming out of Salt Lake. So even though it looks like, oh, what are the Chinese going to do with the ski jump? Believe me, they're going to develop their athletes to become lugers, bobsledders, and ski jumpers.
Next video.
Next video, please.
The Winter Olympics are right around the corner. Here are 5 things you need to know. Number 1, the sports. There are 7 new events at Beijing 2022. Women's monobob, big air freestyle skiing, mixed teams in short track speed skating relay, ski jumping, freestyle ski aerials, and snowboard cross. Maybe you've caught on, but there are more mixed events. That's how the IOC is promoting greater gender diversity. Number 2, robots. Lots and lots of them. At the main press center, food is prepared and served by robot chefs, and the dishes get delivered to tables from an overhead grid. To mitigate the spread of COVID, we can expect to see way more in action. There's a logistics robot for contactless deliveries, and of course, virus-fighting robots that roam around with disinfectant. Number 3, the boycott. You may have heard about it. The US, UK, Australia, Canada, and Denmark are among the countries staging a diplomatic boycott over concerns about China's poor human rights record. That means they won't be sending any political delegates to Beijing, but athletes will still compete in one of the biggest sporting events in the world. Number 4, the bubble, aka the battleground between China's zero COVID policy and the infectious Omicron variant. The closed loop will cover stadiums, venues, accommodations, and ceremonies, all to keep distance away from the public. And the internet? Well, within the loop, Beijing has promised access to partially unrestricted internet access, dropping the Great Firewall that normally blocks services like Facebook and YouTube. Number 5, and last but not least, the athletes, from legends like Shaun White, Yuzuru Hanyu, and Chloe Kim, to up-and-coming stars like Aimin Yu and Matvey Mishkov. They'll all be there to get their hands on the gold and hopefully get back home safe and sound.
We're going to go right into the last one. This gives you a little bit more of the Chinese perspective, a little more cultural, kind of the just a little more of the country than just these, more American net telecasts.
练越练越熟，实践出真知。把我们的非常精髓的这种传统文化给它宣传出来，不光是在国内，还要让它走出去。从世界各地来的朋友齐聚北京，两个平台呢，把自己的能力表现出来。
让更多的人能感受到优秀传统文化的灿烂。
这就是传承和发展。
So it's a big deal that the Olympics are happening right after Chinese New Year. So it's kind of part of their whole celebrations. So if Matt is still here, I'm not sure, but I want to introduce Matt now. So you probably all know Matt. Matt's been a KUSA 9 News reporter for 23 years. He's based in a mountain newsroom, lives in Silverthorne, right down the road, raised in Pueblo, and a fifth-generation Colorado native, and a proud Colorado State University alumni. Please welcome Matt Renoux.
Hey.
Mom, she's watching.
Yeah, my mom. Where's that camera? Is it right there? Hi, Mom. She's tuning in too. Isn't that cool? Hello to all the Zoomers out there as well. Thank you, Ron. Appreciate that. Yeah, 23 years, 6 official Olympic Games is what I've covered. I kind of count it as 6.5 because while we made the decision not to go to Tokyo, I did get to cover cultural stories. We tend to try to get out to an Olympic city before the Olympics, before things get too busy, and then cover the cultural stories, the technology stories. We like to talk to the organizing committee, do stories about security or whatever might be a big news topic. And so we did all that back in 2019 in Tokyo, and then had all those cultural stories then to run on 9 News, even though we weren't there, which was nice because then we didn't go, but it kind of felt like we still went. With Beijing, we don't have that luxury. But so I count it about 6.5. But this would have been 8 had everything been going properly. But we know that things have changed and pivoted. And so some of the stuff you've seen, I mean, there are a lot of Colorado connections, though. So we're going to stay put like we did with Tokyo. And we're going to cover our Colorado athletes, even some not Colorado athletes, and then talk to Colorado companies and work those Colorado connections. We're going to go to watch parties so we can be with family members and friends as they watch their loved ones compete in China. And so it's sort of the same model we did for Tokyo, changed up just a little bit, and hopefully learning a few things from that. But there are a lot of connections. And when you look at the one venue that's been built, the one new venue, and it's a speed skating venue, and it's going to be breathtaking on television. We've already seen some of it already. It's big, huge LED screens wrapped around the building that can change color and font, and they can write whatever they want on the outside of it. And then on the inside, it's obviously got speed skating, but a Colorado company called Populous won a contest to design that facility, that venue. And part of some of the stories we'll be working on, if you watch 9 News, you'll see more of later. But one of the things that they wanted to do, the organizing committee with Beijing 2020 is they wanted that ice to be as cold as possible. And so they worked with Populous to create this roof that's similar in structure a little bit to DIA. and it actually allows them to cool the ice, I guess, more efficiently from what we understand, and then hopefully set and break some world records, because a harder, more solid ice surface is going to work better for these speed skaters. And so stuff like that's got this great Colorado connection right out of Denver and Colorado. And so that's just some of the stuff that we've been working on. And so watch for that venue. I think that's going to be pretty exciting. And then we saw the reuse as well. And these Olympics, you know, they've got a lot of firsts. It's the first Beijing, the first city to have a summer and winter Olympics. And then on that flip side, it's the first winter Olympic city to be held with no snow. It's a completely artificial man-made snow. They measure it by the centimeters there. I mean, some of the video you saw made it look very snowy. It's not. And so it's hundreds and hundreds of snow guns and fans that have been set up all over the place to do this. But why I think China's trying to pull this off the way they are, and they have spent a sizable amount of money, is because there's an emerging market for skiing and snowboarding in Eastern Asian countries, which is why you saw South Korea push so hard, which is why even Japan, Nagano's looking at redoing the Olympics. And so there's money to be made. And if you can tap into that tourism market, as we all know in Colorado, then you're going to make some money. And so that's what they're trying to accomplish, I think, maybe with these games, and to show it's a place that you can ski and snowboard and speed skate and monobob, right? Monobob. Another interesting thing about monobob is that the reason they're doing this is because bobsleds have gotten so technical, like BMW or whoever designing these bobsleds and within regulation trying to come up these modifications to make them just slightly faster. Monobob said, we're not going to do that. Everyone gets the same thing, and it's based on athletic skill. And so countries that maybe don't have the money that the United States does will be more competitive in monobob because they've got the same gear as everyone else. And so it really becomes what's that? I don't know if Jamaica's doing the monobob, but they are back with Cool Running. So watch Jamaica come back. 24 years. It's been 24 years since Jamaica's had a bobsled team, and they're back with theirs. I think what else were we supposed to cover there, Ron? We're keeping this loose.
Just some of the venues and things like that. But I thought we would talk about COVID a little bit, kind of the elephant in the room. How it could affect. I mean, think about it. You could have a figure skater do their short program, they're in first place, and then by the time the long program comes along, he's tested positive. And think about how the potential for complete upheaval and chaos in all these events. Well, you went, and I want you to talk about the figure skating championship.
Yeah, it's great that you pointed out figure skating. COVID will be a big deal. Clearly, it was a big deal in Tokyo, but it was mostly support staff and members of, not necessarily the athletes, but members of the team that were tied to the athletes. Not a lot of athletes tested positive in Tokyo. That's probably going to be a little bit different in Beijing because Omicron variant is now starting to pop up there, and we all know how that thing works, right? And so that could be a really big game changer. And we went out to Nashville for the U.S. Figure Skating National Championships. There are some Colorado athletes that we wanted to get, and our parent company, Tegna, has 20 NBC stations around the country, so there are other athletes, and we really just wanted to get out there. There's so many, obviously, big names in figure skating. And then we get out to Nashville, and it's like the world had never seen a pandemic, and everything was, no airport, no one, it's just normal. And then except to get into the venue, Bridgestone, right? We had to take COVID tests, and then we had to show vaccination records, and then had to be masked up, and the guy I work with, Johnny Kurt, he and I were wearing like triple masks, and then still they had 7 figure skaters test positive for COVID at the national championships. The #1 female figure skater, #1 pairs figure skating team among them. And so they were there, and then they were told, well, you're not going to get to compete. Now, for some of them, they already had the points and everything they needed to still go to China. Some of them, it probably hurt, but it was an indication of if China doesn't do things right, what we're going to see, right? It's going to, oh, this person we thought was going to compete, and now they're not, or maybe an entire event's going to have to be canceled or postponed. And normally that's something we see because of weather. Now I think COVID is going to play a much bigger role.
And it's scary that China just got the Omicron variant a week ago, 10 days ago. At least that's what they reported. If that's the case, it doesn't. We might have some surprises in Beijing.
Well, and as an example, we had been going through Omicron here in Colorado when we flew out to Nashville. Nashville hadn't experienced it yet, but that weekend that we were there, they had 150,000 cases over the weekend. One in every 50 Nashville or Tennessean residents that weekend had acquired COVID, and it was all Omicron variant. So it had hit them right when that event had taken place and then just spread like wildfire. And so, yeah, to your point, Ron, if it's just now popping up, if we'll see, it's a closed loop bubble and they're proud of it. And the IOC has said it's going to work. So I guess we'll see.
It worked for the NBA. So we'll see how it works.
Right.
And you wonder, and the next thing I want to talk about, and a lot of this is not necessarily China specific, but they have these free speech restrictions and they've asked athletes not to speak out. And, we could question why the Olympics were given to China. The IOC for these Olympics, they had one other choice. Almaty, Kazakhstan was the only other country or city that was in the running. Oslo, Norway was in the running for a while and they were going to get it. But then the IOC came in with we need a couple of dedicated traffic lanes, 24 hours a day. And we need this for the IOC members. And Norway, a good egalitarian country, said, our residents aren't going for that. We'll wait. And they were stuck with Beijing. But as you were saying, Matt, it is what these Asian countries are banking on is the skiing, the recognition, and things like that. But the free speech restriction, I think, could be a real issue there.
I think maybe, those things, I think if it weren't for the pandemic, would probably be more of a news story. They would take a little more of the center stage. I mean, you saw it to some extent with Russia and sort of the concerns that athletes and media had with eavesdropping on their devices during Sochi, and it was a little bit of a story. I don't know. I think a lot of times these countries, for the sake of looking maybe like everyone expects them to look, relax some of those restrictions. I mean, and this is on a much, much smaller scale and a completely different pivot, but you go back to the Winter Games in Salt Lake, and the big concern is the Mormon Church going to be a huge factor in these Olympics? Are they going to be recruiting? Are they going to be everywhere where there are venues? And the Mormon Church said, no, we're going to step back and enjoy the Olympics. And we're going to, and they did. I mean, they had genealogy places set up where you go in and check your genealogy and look back at your genes and your family history. And that was cool. And so I think a lot of times maybe the expectation for what people might think could be the worst out of it is pulled back a little bit in these games. And so I don't know, we'll see. Facebook and Instagram can now be allowed. And you look over at these Spider Team USA outfits, and the whole idea behind that Spider had come up with is this American rebellious spirit, right? And so it's supposed to be this rebellious graffiti type thing that they're trying to portray. If athletes want to speak, if they want to say something, they're going to say it. And the genie's out of the bottle by the time they've done it on television. And so what are you going to do? So. Well, and that was the social media. They're going to open up these social media accounts and things that usually are blocked in China. They'll open those up. They'll release the restrictions on the firewalls, and then athletes and their staff, because there won't be any spectators from other countries, will be able then to access the things they're used to. The full broad scope of that, I guess, is what those people over there who are experiencing what those restrictions are will then find out. But for sure, Facebook and Instagram, so they can at least get on the gram and post pictures of their food.
They realize they have to ease some of these restrictions.
I have a question about that then. So if they ease those restrictions, are they easing them for also like Chinese nationals, or is it just the athletes the people associated with the games that are, does anybody know that answer?
That's a good question. And I guess I'm not an IT guy, but I think once you drop that restriction on the firewall, then people can access them. And so I guess if you don't get that and you live in China and now it's open, then you can open up an account for a couple of weeks.
So how about the fact, let's talk about more the competition and how the unfamiliar venues, especially with the skiers, are really going to make a difference. I mean, these skiers, every Olympics have test events a year before. Every single sport gets to go to the venue, even if it's a figure skating. Like you think, well, every figure skating arena looks the same. Well, no, it smells different. It looks different. The stands are different. Your eyesight is different. Whatever it is, all those things mean so much to these athletes. And you look at skiers and they haven't even been, the downhitters have not seen this course. That's almost unheard of. So the practices are going to be good. So all the practices are going to be televised live as well. So that's going to be a big deal, especially in these early event, skiing events.
Yeah, I mean, especially with skiing, I think if you watch some of those early practices, and you'll see some pretty tentative athletes who are usually very aggressive because they haven't seen it. And there is a difference with ice, actually, though. The ice is a lot more firm at higher altitude. So like a World Arena at Colorado Springs, where some of these figure skaters train at, that ice is different than it is at sea level. And so there is a difference, not knowing what that ice is like. And so a lot of those practices are going to be crucial for figures, or for skiing. It is a big deal. We sat down months ago and talked to Michaela Schifrin about that. And the one thing she had going for her, she said, is that really no one's been there. They're all on the same level playing field except the Chinese. And so they'll all go into it with the same blinders on. And then it's really going to come down to the athletes who are best at adapting and pivoting, for standing up there, maybe learning from the videos that they've been watching, and then being able to adjust to that, between not knowing the course, which they don't know, and then the expectation there's going to be high winds like there were in South Korea, because it's essentially the same type of climate. There are no trees. And so it's going to be windy. Yeah. And so the wind will be a factor, and then obviously not seeing the course. And those two things, I think, might hold some racers back quite a bit when they actually are going down the course. And so we'll see how aggressive some of those downhillers are. That is a really good question. I don't know what the elevation is. 32, maybe, is popping into my head from reading somewhere. Oh, there's a big difference between man-made snow. Natural snow's got a longer drop, right? It's forming up in higher elevation, and has got longer to fall. So those snowflakes have chance to form and crystallize different and become the unique snowflakes that are so beautiful that we know. Man-made snow doesn't have that time. It's pumped out, it's frozen. And so it's actually like a full circle, I think, or a square is what the flake is for man-made snow. It's not ideal, I think, in some cases. It depends on the temperature, but I think they're worried about that too, and how fast they can go, how warm it might get at times. It's a cold place, so maybe that's not going to be a factor. Still involved.
The question is, sorry, I need
Yeah,
to,
okay.
for Zoom people can't, so we're going to have to give you microphones from now on. The Zoom people. So the question is who has control of the snow conditions? Is it FIS? Is it the IOC? Like, who is controlling? Because the FIS, as we all know, those in the ski racing world, is very, very particular. So I'm going to let Matt answer.
Yeah, still FIS, but it's of the responsibility of the organizing committee of Beijing 2022 to put that product out there. And so you can have all the control factors you want, whether it's FIS or IOC. It still comes down to what you're putting on the hill. Vancouver, they assumed a great place for snow, and then it was 55 degrees during the Vancouver Olympics, right? And so there's only so much you can do with your environment. So what has Beijing 2022 been able to do is the bigger question. And then what's that condition going to be like? So, you know, US skiers are used to a certain thing. European skiers are used to a certain thing. That's a big factor because there aren't a lot of World Cup competitions, especially during the pandemic, that take place in Eastern Asia where it doesn't snow. And so that condition is going to be different no matter what the standard is. It's going to be different. And so the ability to adapt is what's going to come down to the athlete.
So one of the questions that came from the audience, thank you, Tim. The answer, Beijing's altitude is 141 feet above sea level.
Well, that's the city of
That's the
Beijing.
city of
Yeah,
Beijing,
the
resorts.
these resorts that they've built is I think was the question, right?
Okay, so we'll look up where the resort,
Let's
what the
let's
resort
Google that.
elevations are. We'll Google that.
Let's take a guess. I'm gonna say 3,200 feet. 3,200 feet.
2,500.
You're saying 25.
We'll find out.
900. We got a 900 feet over. That's a good guess. Yep.
It's incredible to hear that Beijing is 141 feet. That's
So,
like incredible.
so let's talk about some of our hopefuls. So we've got all nine. So last Olympics, we won 9 gold medals, 2 team ones in women's hockey and men's curling, and then 7 individuals. So Shaun White, Chloe Kim, Jamie Anderson, Red Gerard, David Wise, and Jessie Diggins and Keegan Randall. Those were our 7 individual Olympians and the 2 of the 2 teams. They're all coming back. Matt, you want to give us, you want to handicap the field?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'll go through some of these. I know. Yeah. I mean, I know a little about some and not much about others, but and there are other names that we're going to want to watch that, you know, but you know, Shaun, yeah, Shaun's the big one, right? I mean, he's arguably the biggest name in snowboarding, maybe even in winter sports. And so he's coming up to his 5th Olympics. He barely made these Olympic Games. You know, qualifiers in Colorado, he struggled. He had a binding issue. Then he said he had COVID. And so he had a rough time making this. And then even then it was the 3rd spot. But having said that, it's Shaun White. So if experience has anything to do with it, with understanding of a variation of snow conditions and what wind's going to do. And he obviously did well in South Korea with the conditions there, then that plays in to his hand. And so Shaun White, while he barely made these games, is still a big name to watch. And how remarkable I mean, everyone's like, Shaun, why are you coming back? You won gold in South Korea. You could walk out of this thing a champion with a gold medal of 3. And he's coming back. And it's like, what are you thinking? Well, he could be the Fox and then grab another one. And so Shaun's a big name, I think, to watch. Jamie Anderson's already won gold because she just got engaged. And so, you know, she 2 days ago. So she's winning already. Jessie Diggins is a great story, women's cross country skiing. And so 35 World Cup podiums for Jessie, and just really elevating that sport, especially among women right now. And Jessie's just as great as she's ever been. Jessie's going to be fun to watch. By the way, women cross country skiing, right? Super. Jessie's a powerhouse. We're talking about all inclusive inclusivity, adding these mixed gender sports. Did you know that in Nordic combined, women still can't compete at the Olympics? The only sport out there women can't compete in Nordic combined. That's a good question.
And Nordic combined is when they ski and then shoot a gun.
No, that's biathlon. Nordic combined is when they're cross country skiing and then they go off ski jumps, and then their points are combined. Steamboat, a rich history in Nordic combined, with the men's US team winning silver and making history at that, but women still can't compete. And part of that's the number of women who compete, how they do in World Cup competition, but they're hoping for Italy. And so that takes us way off tangent.
Not enough right now. Women's ski jumping is relatively new in the Olympics, and there's probably not enough adept at both sports, adept enough to really make it a competition. So
I think, I don't mean to correct you, but I think
no, there is.
No, there is women's ski jumping, but that's relatively new.
I think it came back.
They've done it the last 3 Olympics, maybe 2. but women's cross or women's Nordic combined still not allowed. And then getting us back on tangent, women's hockey. The women's hockey team for the United States is incredible. It will likely come down to the USA and Canada again, like it did in South Korea. And there is a Colorado connection there. Nicole Hensley is a goalie out of Lakewood, and she's Team USA's goalie. And she grew up down there playing hockey, and there really weren't any teams that she could play with girls. And so she grew up playing hockey with the boys, and is now one of the best male or female goalies on the planet. And she's with Team USA. She's a wall. You can't get anything past her. And so watch for Team USA. They're incredible. And then men's curling. Everyone laughed at mixed doubles kicking things off, but curling runs the entire stretch of the Olympics, and they would probably keep going after the Olympics if they let them. And that's how much they love curling. And so the men's curling team, they made history in South Korea, and a Schuster out of Minnesota. And so, watch for that team Schuster. They're just, curling's where it's at.
And that's going to be on CNBC is like the curling station. And it is quite funny. It's been that way for a couple of Olympics, I believe, since NBC has had it. And because on Wall Street and in any financial district, all the TVs are locked onto CNBC. So during these last couple Olympics, all these financial traders in New York and all these big cities have become the biggest curling fans, because for 2.5 weeks, all they see on their TVs are curling. And there's all like clubs now in New York and things like that where people have really gotten into it.
It's really picking up. If you guys haven't watched curling, when you start watching it, you're really going to get into it. It's a pretty engaging sport. And something you might not know about it is you think the ice that they're on is like what figure skaters are on, or hockey players, like glass, like smooth as glass, but there's these little bumps. They actually use this nozzle and they spray these bumps all over the ice, because the curling rock at the center of it is kind of beveled inside like a suction cup. And if it was flat, that thing wouldn't go very far. And so they create these bubbles. It's called pebbling. And that's what allows that rock to slide as easily as it does, so that then they can sweep in front of it and alter the course. Curling.
So what about Bodie Miller? Is he, I haven't watched.
Boy, if you're talking about Bodie Miller, you haven't watched it in a long time.
So what's the update with Bodie Miller, and what's the update with Michaela Schifrin?
Well, Bodie, is not ski racing anymore. As a matter of fact, I think and I could be wrong about this, I think his last ski race were the World Championships in 2015 when he sliced his Achilles. And by the way, Spyder's making now race suits for downhill racers with Teflon in them to protect those parts of their body that tend to get snapped up by these skis.
So actually we have on display, thank you, Matt, for keep bringing up these Spyder uniforms. One of our board members, Trent Bush, thank you, Trent, has a connection to Spyder. David Jacobs, also Spyder's Colorado company. We'll talk about that. But on the very far end, on the very far right of the exhibit, is that actual Teflon suit that Matt is referring to. You can see it, and it has, so that hopefully it will prevent accidents like that.
So Bodie, that was kind of the thing, right? Achilles. And but he was doing commentary for NBC for a while. I don't really know what he's up to right now.
He is, the last thing I heard very recently, he's starting a ski academy at Devil's Thumb in Granby, and he's got an investor, and he's trying to develop a brand new top ski academy.
And I believe he's got some sort of app out that's supposed to improve your skiing, or I thought I read something like that as well. And then as for Michaela, well, she's, I mentioned Shaun White as like one of the biggest names in winter sports. Michaela is now obviously becoming that. 70, probably get this wrong, 73 World Cup wins. She's got the most slalom wins ever in history. And so she's pretty incredible, right? She's technically the most proficient skier on the planet. So slalom is her thing, and now she's getting into some speed events as well, and doing pretty good with those. And so she had an issue. There was the pandemic. Her grandmother, and then 4 months later, her father passed away. And so she's been struggling to kind of regain her footing a little bit, but I think is in a place now, just from talking to her and only maybe Michaela knows this, but it seems like she's starting to get into this place again where she feels like she can race and not feel guilty about it and just have fun. And so she obviously has Olympic medals, 2 gold and a silver. I was going to down that to a bronze, a silver. And so, Michaela, she'll do well.
She hopes possibly to enter all 5 alpine events, and the schedule is kind to her. If you look at, well, you're not going to be able to see, it's only going to say alpine skiing. It's not going to say what alpine event on that schedule, but the schedule, the events of her events are spaced out enough where she feels like she'll have the right time to recover, and she'll be able to compete possibly in all 5.
The hitch in that giddy up will be COVID, and if things get delayed, wind and how that will delay, because that was also sort of the plan in South Korea, right? And even Bodie Miller, who's a ski racer, I believe said that, but he's like, she could gold medal in all these events, and we know in ski racing how difficult that is because of varying conditions. But initially that schedule was really in her favor in South Korea, and then wind started messing with all that, and so it became a little more difficult for her.
Oh, sorry, we got the answer to the question.
What's the altitude?
We were all wrong.
So it says here, they're being divided into 3 regions, and the new venues for skiing and snowboarding events will be built in an existing winter sports region of China, 55 miles northwest of Beijing. And the region is called, and I hope, forgive me, it's Yanging, and it is 7,100 feet.
Well, that's roughly where like Idaho Springs would be.
Right. And there's a bullet train, by the way, going out 55 miles. Of course there is, right?
Right. And we've talked about that in Colorado as well, like high-speed rail to the mountains, right? Well, South Korea did it for their Olympics, and now Beijing just did it for these Olympics. And I think the drive is normally like several hours, and it's like a 50-minute train ride now because of this bullet train. So you can do it. You can build these things in the mountains. It takes a lot of tunnels and a lot of money, but they can do it.
So Matt, how about some other people that you did some stories on pre-Olympics? What people that you personally are kind of looking forward to seeing compete there? Maybe even if they're not going to win a medal.
A guy that could very well win a medal, and I really like the guy is Red Gerard, and Silverthorne is his hometown. He grew up near Cleveland, so he and his family are Browns fans. So they got a poor choice in football teams, but a great choice in cooking, because his sister Tegan is like this amazing like chef with 25 million followers. And then there's Red, and so and a big family. He's got brothers, and they're in the snowboard films, but Red's just this really fun guy. And interviewing him before South Korea, and he was 17 years old then. I believe the youngest person to win a gold medal Winter Games in like 90 years or something.
Since 28 or something like that.
Yeah, just this really mature for his age kid at 17, and was really forward thinking and inside of himself and thoughtful, and said, the one thing though is when I'm done with this is when he's 17, I just kind of want to have a normal job, a 9-to-5 job. And then we talked to him a little while ago, now 4 years later, and he's this big celebrity, travels the world. He's meeting these people. He's in films now with snowboarding. And I said, you still want a 9-to-5 job, Red? And he goes, no, I don't want a 9-to-5 job. Still a great forward thinking guy, and just wonderful.
He was saying, I saw a video of him, and he says he wants to be more of a leader in this Olympics. Well, before, you're a 17-year-old kid and you're just out of your mind, like with just so overwhelmed. And like, now that he's got it, he wants to be able to show the young kids what to do. And, he's still only 21, right? And like, it doesn't surprise me that at 17, he was a thoughtful young man, but and he was joking about how, I just wanted to get more followers than my sister,
That is not going to happen. But speaking about that, and you're wearing the sweatshirt, what he's doing for that is Red's backyard, and there's one at Copper, and they're starting to they're starting to put these things all over the place. Red's backyard, and they're just little, And they're just little terrain parks at ski areas. And you don't have to pay anything. You just go to the ski area. You can walk right up to it. It's right at the base of these ski areas. And his whole idea is, it's a expensive thing to get into as a 12-year-old or a 7-year-old. So just put these things where kids can walk up and have some fun. And that generates more youth in the sport. It keeps things going. So there's an example of Red taking a leadership role in the sport and getting people a little more interested in it.
And he's a neighbor of yours.
He just lives right down the street, and it's about a 10-minute drive to Red's house. And a great family. I love his family. They're cool people, and just they got the coolest view in Summit County. And then of course his terrain park, which is why they call it Red's backyard, is because his backyard is a terrain park. They built this terrain. It's got a tow rope. Mariah Bell, just before we move on, will be another figure skater. She's got Colorado ties after training in Monument. And she, I don't know if she's got a chance to medal, but maybe not. It's Mariah, what makes her cool is she should have gone 4 years ago to the Olympics, and she just wasn't in the right place, didn't make the team. And at 21, most figure skaters at her level, after not making the Olympics, probably would have stepped away, but she stuck with it. She kept competing. She kept in her sport. And then she placed first at nationals in Nashville. The first time she'd ever done that, skate of her life. And at 25 is now the oldest American figure skater ever to compete at the Olympics. So just for us old guys out there, it's fun to watch another oldie out there competing at the Olympics.
So Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about what to expect on the 9 News telecasts that are going to be before and after the prime time? Because I know you got some stuff planned.
Yeah, we do. We got stuff planned for these games. The good news is if you're a fan of 9 News, you don't have to wait as long to watch it, especially at 4 o'clock, because our 4 o'clock will be at 3 o'clock. And then our 5 o'clock will be at 4 o'clock. And then I believe next with Kyle Clark is then at 5. And then the late show will then, that one sort of fluctuates in the night, depending on NBC and how the events are going. It will roll a little bit in the evening, 10, 10:30, 11, whenever things finish up. And then we'll also have our Olympic Zone show as well, which is a phenomenal show to catch up on stuff that's going on and then learn about things like pebbling and curling. And then on 9news.com, we're also putting together schedules when everything will run. There'll be a link where you can see when certain things are going to happen, because that was a big complaint during the Tokyo Games. Like when we clearly there's all these different places to watch these events. So when can we see them? And so there's going to be a link for that. And then a new program that our 9news.com team has put together called The Watch, which will be even more robust during the Olympics, kind of coming in and talking about events, teeing up events that are coming up. And so a lot going on at 9 News during the Olympics. It's a big deal for our station, and we put a lot of resources into it. So hopefully it helps people just understand and navigate some of the time differences when things happen.
Matt, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we're gonna, no, Trisha has a question.
You mentioned economic impact and why, places like Beijing want to host these Olympics, but is there any data that says, for the last Olympics, Winter Olympics held in the United States, which I believe was Salt Lake, did they receive a lot of economic impact from this? Or is it more just because there's such fringe resorts or fledgling wannabe resorts that they're like, oh, if we build it, they will come?
Right. That's a great question. I think if you look back at most of the Olympics in North America, you'll find that they are a pretty successful Olympics financially. Salt Lake was very financially successful for Utah. I think Atlanta was kind of like a break-even type thing. Vancouver did pretty well. You look at Sochi, where Russia spent $50 billion on that Olympics. It was not financially successful, but that's not what they wanted out of the games. They talked about this resort and then the Olympic Village was supposed to be a Formula One racing village in the summer. And I don't know if any of that really.
It did. So they do host the Formula One race in Sochi, and they have World Cup events, but it still doesn't pay back
the money they spent.
The investment. But some countries use it. Well, we're just going to get a part of it. So to Russia, it was just to get a Formula One race was a huge deal. for St. Petersburg. So the big stadium they built in St. Petersburg that hosted the Champions League final, the soccer, which is the Super Bowl of world soccer, team world soccer, not World Cup. So it does bring in some big events, but it never, pays back the 50 billion. But that's why countries like state-run countries can come in and spend their money, because here the government, the US government cannot spend any money on Olympics. So it all has to be private donors.
Well,
that's
and
why
something
those
you're
big-
going to see that's going to change with the cost is what's keeping a lot of these countries from participating. And so the IOC is aware of that. And you'll see, you see it with China already with just one venue and a lot of reuse and temporary facilities in Paris, in LA. It will be all existing facilities and temporary facilities. And so they're working on that. It's called a white elephant. The bird's nest in China was considered a little bit of that for a while, but they're clearly reusing it. It's a expensive thing that you build and then no one ever uses it. Look at everything they built in Rio. That a lot of it's been broken into and is now run down and vandalized. And so that's what they're trying to avoid. It's really prestigious when you can do it, but then what do you get out of it? Utah's done a great job of monetizing what they built. And now they need another Olympics to come along so they can pump some more funds into those facilities to keep them around or spruce them up or add something new. And that legacy is what draws maybe some, when people say, let's just have the Olympics in 4 cities or 3 cities and keep rotating. That's not what the IOC wants to do. To their credit, they want to build some legacy structure, right? In Rio, for all their problems, it was this infrastructure of highway that wasn't there that now people have to get around their country a little bit easier. If Colorado ever had it, it'd be high-speed rail into the mountains. That would be our legacy. We're putting this money into the games. What are we going to get out of it? And so the IOC looks for these places where they can sort of put that money in and then see some sort of return to the people that live there.
And even in places like Athens, where you go to the Athens venues and they're all dilapidated, they're all things, but they got a brand new airport and a brand new subway system out of it that is good. So there's points of it. Now, we're talking about Salt Lake and future Olympics. So let's talk about where the next Winter Olympics is going to be. That's going to be in Milan in 4 years. And that's the city. That's the city. Sorry. That's the city. And then the speed events or the skiing events will be in places like Cortina, which hosted the 56 Olympics, and Bormio, another downhill event. After Milan, it's up in the air as far as where the Winter Olympics are going to be. However, the thinking is that 2030 is going to be in Vancouver again. That's kind of the favorite. That, like I said, it hasn't been
or Nagano. Nagano's
Nagano, right? It's up in the air, but 2034 is almost certain to be back in Salt Lake City again.
There's you can follow them. There's a social media site called Salt Lake 2030. And so they sort of try to promote Salt Lake 2030. The problem with that is it's 2 years after LA.
Right.
And so how do you monetize that so quick after a summer game? So that might push Salt Lake a little bit back. I think they would still like to see 2030, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
It's not going to happen because the LA games of 2028 do not want another Olympics so close because it draws the funneling of the money. There's no money left over 2 years later.
Right.
Right. It's the whole reason why they changed the winter and summer games to be offset 2 years, because 1 year to have both Olympics was just too much for corporations to kind of use their money.
Except this year.
Right. And the next summer game. So 2024 will be in Paris. 2028 will be in LA. And 2032 will be in Brisbane, Australia.
So we're going to see you guys for each one of those. Here.
Right here, watch parties.
Oh, good. Yeah. So we're going to kind of start to wrap up here just because we try to keep them tight. So one thing that I always love about the Olympics and everything are the mascots and how did they come up with them? So we found this cute, this amazing video on the Beijing Mascots. And then, because I was heavily involved in the 2015s and our mascots were Pete and Earl, and they were a raccoon and a mountain lion. And yeah, so I love mascots. So we're going to watch this short video. So there's two, obviously.
So the one on the right Paralympics. Mascot, the one on the left is the regular Olympic mascot. That's the lantern.
That's a red Chinese lantern for the Paralympics. So then now he's falling into snow, and then the snow shakes off, and now there's still snow left on the Chinese lantern. And this is an ode to their Chinese New Year. And then obviously China and the panda is this a panda? Yes, very much so. And I love that the Paralympics start exactly 1 month prior. So that'll be a good way for us to remember. Yeah, so I just love I like the mascots of it. And then we were talking about, you want to.
Yeah, this is something that comes from years ago, but we've had so many Olympics in places with COVID, Olympics in places where you don't see the huge crowds like you do in Europe. And as you see, that's going to turn. So I wanted to show you a little bit of the official song from the Lillehammer Olympics. And this was shown on the nightly news after the closing ceremonies as kind of a wrap of the games. And this song was meant to keep people warm at all the venues. So there's moves to it. And whenever I hear this, I spent a month in Lillehammer during the games, and I cannot hear this without thinking of all the times I've heard it. And while Jen gets it queued up, I got an autograph from Axel Lund-Swindal during the championships in 2015. And I asked him to write something on the thing. It's just like a personal joke between my wife and I. And I said, I asked her, can you sign it to Libby? Wish that was my wife. And he's like, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, oh, Axel, please. I was at the Lillehammer Olympics. I know all the moves to the UL Fluka. And I started doing them. And he just stopped, and you should have seen his face. And he said, I was 10 years old during those games. It's the whole reason why I became a ski racer. And I know all the moves still too. He signed it that way, yes. Oh, and Oslo in 52 hosted an Olympics. So a lot of these are interspersed with original footage from the 52 games. Okay. And Norway is the birthplace of winter sports. When the first Olympics happened, the Nordic countries didn't even want to join because they said, we have our own Olympics. We have the Nordic Games. This guy's struggling. Right. So Tanya and Nancy was this Olympics. One time, right on that night of the Tanya and Nancy, there was a security guard, and we're like, "What are you doing here?" She's like, "Well, just in case Tanya and Nancy fight." Before each event, they had these, well, I could call them as Norwegian cheerleaders. They had jeans and Norwegian sweaters on, and they would dance to all these songs. And this guy here, you see this outfit? That is the flag of Friesland, Netherlands. Friesland is the county where all the speed skaters in the Netherlands come from. Those are the Dutch. It's a little long. The Norwegian, so that's the king of Norway doing that. 50,000 Norwegians stood in the cross-country arena at the end of the 50-kilometer race for 3 hours waiting for the last Kenyan cross-country skier so they could all cheer him. And then, so this was live on the news, and then they show the newscasters. I do. And then the one I can't do, you're supposed to take your foot and then hop around. And if you Google UL Fluka, you have all these Norwegians, like 20-year-olds, who are to do it like at parties now. Like it's, you know, this is Norway. This is in their blood, right? This is all these heroes they're heroes of '94 are, you know, they've grown up hearing about them, even if they weren't even born yet. And it's funny to see 25-year-olds drunk 25-year-olds at parties in the snow doing these events and doing these moves. So I wanted to thank Matt again, please, everyone. Everyone watch 9 News and watch his programs during the Olympics. And I'm sure we'll have him back sometime. I want to thank everyone. A few more questions. Do we have a little bit of time if people have some more questions?
Yeah, if there's any more questions.
Any more questions from the audience?
Yes.
Matt, what about Kyle Mack? Is he coming back? The one who read the jacket.
Yeah, no,
Right?
I haven't heard about Kyle Mack on this one, but you're right. I mean, they're a pretty tight knit group, and
wasn't he from Silverthorne, Kyle
Mhm.
Mack?
Well, yeah, that
Yeah.
area. So
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you don't know.
mm-mm.
No. And poor Tess Johnson for
Mhm.
us was so depressing
yeah,
that she didn't make it.
no, and we
Yeah.
just found out Breezy Johnson,
Yeah.
you know, our best downhiller right now, got hurt. So
Yeah, she's not gonna. Yeah, she's hurt. She got hurt a while back and thought she'd be able to return, but is not going to be able to make it. And favorites like Steve Nyman aren't in the team.
Steve.
There was there's the Olympic Committee has a new allocation for a lot of these sports, and it's complicated. And if you go on NBCOlympics.com, Ted Ligety talks about it a lot. Just, I think it was today's thing. And he doesn't like it because it has certain restrictions, and the Austrians even protested and got maybe an extra spot. They don't want so many people that aren't as proficient in the events skiing. Like at the World Championships, it's a whole different story. There's 70 skiers skiing, and they want to do that. They want the Kenyans and the Sri Lankans there because the idea is to open up the sport. Whereas at the Olympics, they want to keep this at kind of the top. Oh, speaking of multiple Olympians, everybody knows Sarah Schlepper, possibly Buzz's daughter. So this will be her 6th Olympics, the 2nd for Mexico. And she is going to carry the Mexican flag in to the opening ceremonies with another a Mexican national with her. So that is a big deal. Buzz is very, very happy. I actually got to tell Buzz. He told me, I don't know, one time when I went, he's like, yeah, Sarah may, carry the flag. And I'm like, really, that's something. And then I checked and I saw that morning, and I went in like, hey, congratulations, Buzz. It's happening. And he's like, oh no, she's going to compete. She's going to compete in GS and Super G. I'm like, no, she's carrying the flag. And he's like, she is? I got to call her right now. Yes. Yes. I'm sorry. Oh, why? So why is she carrying the flag for Mexico? She married a Mexican prince, I believe. And and so that's why that gives her the ability to ski for Mexico. But the reason she's carrying the flag is she's a 6-time Olympian and she's wearing Mexico colors. Like that is a big deal, right? To be okay, yeah, that is one of the reasons. But it is a little odd to not have a national carry the flag, but it's an honor of how special. You don't get to go to, especially a skier does not usually get to go to 6 Olympic Games. Yes.
I just, we have a tidbit about Sarah and her son, Lasse.
Yes. Her son's name is named after a Norwegian skier, by the way, Lasse Schuss.
Yeah.
I had a chat with Buzz in his ski shop recently. He says that Sarah has eyes on the Olympics 4 years from now. Her son Lasse will be old enough to compete in those Olympic Games, and she will presumably still be able to ski for Mexico. So this could be a history-making event 4 years from now when a mother and a son both compete for Olympic gold.
You hear that, Mom?
That is
Still
great.
time.
That's I'd love to see that. All right, thanks everyone for coming. We appreciate it. I'll stick around a little bit if anyone has any other questions they want to ask me.
So another quick shout out to our spider competition exhibit. So it's amazing. And if you all get a chance, go to the far left. And on the inside of the jacket is a very inspirational message that's given to every Olympian that Spider puts inside the coat. So try not to touch the coat as you read it. We are blowing it up. So if you come to visit, maybe in a week or so, we will have it on a plaque. But it's a very, very powerful message. And it says that we are all behind them. And we are. So go Team USA. Thank you, Matt, so much for coming. And thank you, everyone, for coming in person. And thank you to everyone online. We didn't forget about you. And for those of you online, if you loved what you saw, please consider donating.
Yeah.